This is fungi. These are some of the 1.5 million types of fungi. This is the humongous world of fungus. Fungi were one of the first organisms on Earth billions of years ago. Fungi are their own kingdom. They're not animals, plants, or bacteria. Fungi live everywhere. Space stations, deserts, deserts, Antarctica, nuclear reactors. There's plenty of shroom for all fungi. Every day you walk on mushroom mycelium, not just mushroom's root system. Mycelium communicates information and transfers nutrients. It also builds soil and gives life to all plants on Earth. Here is fungi saving the world. This is fungi saving you. There's fungi for relaxation, concentration, energy, and immune support. This is you on shrooms, tapping into the humongous world of fungus.
When I say to someone that I'm interested in mushrooms or that I have a mushroom company, you get often few kinds of reactions. Some are like, are you talking magic mushrooms? And some are like, gross, I don't like the flavor of mushrooms. And some are really excited for various reasons. But they are a kingdom, as you saw in the video. And when something is a kingdom, that means that there's a lot of different kinds of things. So if you think of all the animals that live on Earth, there's quite a few kinds. Just in mammals, compare a chihuahua and a blue whale, and they're drastically different, right? And if you compare even plants, not all plants are good for you. I know obviously plant-based diet is right now a big thing, a lot of people on it, but a lot of plants will kill you. And mushrooms are no different. Some of them will hurt you, some of them will heal you. And just to kind of get the mushroom lingo out of the way, mushroom is actually what is called the fruiting body. And fungi is a kingdom, right? Fungi is like the umbrella. But often people, when they talk about the fungi kingdom, they talk about mushrooms. But mushroom is actually like the fruiting body. So let's think of an apple tree, for example. The fruit, the actual apple, would be the fruiting body here. That's the part that is visible and you will eat, and it usually gets reproduced annually, with some exceptions. And then the rooting system, which is often referred to as mycelium, there's also like hyphae, like an early version of it. But mycelium is like the actual apple tree itself. The bark and the roots, right? And there's a lot of mycelium underground. So wherever you will go around the world, there will be mycelium underground, and then sometimes you'll see these fruiting bodies popping up. And the mycelium is really important for environment, and the fruiting body can be really helpful for us. So since there's mycelium everywhere, it serves a big purpose. So about 2.4 billion years ago, so if the Earth is 4.5 billion years old, 2.4 billion years ago, mushrooms or fungi came from the sea to the dry land. And what's actually fascinating about mushrooms to me is that they're actually very similar to animals. So we're way closer as humans to mushrooms than we are to, for example, plants. For example, mushrooms cannot produce their own food through photosynthesis like plants can. They have to eat something. By the way, they also breathe oxygen and expel CO2, just like animals. But they need to eat something, and since nothing else grew on dry land, mushrooms decided to, for a little over 1 billion years, eat rocks. So they're survivors, you know? And then later, as plants were entered into Earth, the mushrooms helped the plants to collect water and nutrients from the soil. And that happens still today. So almost all plants that you will eat have used fungi to collect water and nutrients. But this is not a biology lesson. I'm not here to talk to you for hours and hours about fungi. Some of you might find it fascinating, some of you might not. But just wanted to give you kind of a quick overview. And the spores are, by the way, those are the seeds. So you go from the rooting system to the fruiting body. The fruiting body will produce spores. Spores are like the seeds. And then the spores will fly away and produce more hyphae and mycelium. So that's kind of the life cycle of a mushroom. My company, Four Sigmatic, is focused on these functional mushrooms. Those are like healthy mushrooms, often sometimes known as medicinal mushrooms, but since medicinal marijuana, that's often a bad label. These are completely legal, safe, nothing to do with psychedelics. So that's why I prefer the word functional mushrooms. And these functional mushrooms are often also called adaptogens. How many have heard the word adaptogen? Good bunch, okay. So this is right now really trendy. It's actually not that new of a concept. It's just become very popular. So adaptogen research started in the Soviet Union for the army. What the army figured out, and this is, by the way, not just the Soviet army. I'm originally from Finland, and I had to go to the Finnish army. And the same thing is, in certain situations, the soldiers are given stimulants. Amphetamine, for example. I was in the Air Force, you fly in a fighter jet, you crash on enemy territory, pump you up a little amphetamine, and try to run as far as you can in the next 24 hours, so hopefully you'll be safe after that. But what happens is that you have a little bit of a letdown. A lighter version of a stimulant might be like Adderall, lighter compared to amphetamine, or caffeine that we often consume all the time, right? So the Soviets were like, hey, is there anything else that we could take which would performance, maybe not as much, but would improve performance that wouldn't give you the letdown the next day? And they sent this Dr. Lazarov, to research few things. And Lazarov studied the best things that he could find in the world and came up with 5 things that he thought were adaptogens. And the word adaptogen comes from the fact that it helps you to adapt to stressors. So it helps you to adapt to stressors. And hopefully, it will not give you a letdown. So in order for something to be an adaptogen, it needs 3 things. It's non-habit forming, means it's not addictive. If something is addictive, it cannot be an adaptogen. It has to be something you could take every day safely and you don't get used to it. Secondly, it restores balance. So it restores balance in your body. And then finally, it's non-specific, which is often sometimes hard if you have a scientific mind to figure out, because scientific studies are usually done on one single variable, one marker. And when something is non-specific, it can help with the brain and the immune function, and that can be complicated. And that's where it's often in health, like hormones, for example. Even though you have a marker like testosterone, it's sometimes complicated because hormones go up and down. You pull a lever, another one goes up and down, right? But that's what adaptogens are. And that's what some of these best mushrooms are as well. And these are kind of my passion, I would say. I love fungi and I love the biology of fungi, but I'm mostly interested in is what can the fungi do for you? How can it improve your cognitive function, your immune system, your skin? I've been running my business now for about 7 years. Normally, I've been traveling 40 to 60 times a year, and during that time, I've lived in the last 10 years, I've lived in 10 countries. And I've not been sick in 11 years. And one of the reasons why I have to thank is the use of adaptogens and mushrooms for the immune system. But back to my story. So I was brought up in Finland. I'm a 13th generation farmer and mushroom enthusiast. And I was brought up to learn about mushrooms through my mom. My mom, when I was like yay high with my brother, we went foraging for mushrooms. And one of the first things that people get wrong about mushrooms that they always grow on the ground. They actually also grow on trees. This is a chaga mushroom that we also use in the mushroom coffee that is outside. And a lot of them are hard. You can't eat them. Actually, you should not eat mushrooms raw. Just a general rule of thumb, whatever mushroom we're talking about, don't have them raw. Because they have this structure called chitin that is we humans are not really good at absorbing, and we lack this enzyme. Think of the shell of a lobster is made out of chitin. So try eating a lobster shell, not good. So you kind of have to process it. But they are these beautiful creatures. Most people just think of that classic mushroom shape which I showed you with the stem and the cap. But there's so many different shapes and sizes, different types of mushrooms. And some of the best ones grow on trees. Because like I mentioned, mushrooms, like animals, they need something to eat. And often when people ask me, like, what should you eat? What's a healthy diet? I joke to them is that you should eat dirt and trees. The healthiest thing you can eat is dirt and trees. Unfortunately, we're not equipped to assimilate either of them. So we need to eat something that has eaten them. So things that grow in the soil, that had minerals, and then can get the good gut biome from the soil into our body. And also trees are incredibly healthy. So obviously from maple syrup to pine pollen, but also to these tree mushrooms that serve so many different functions. This is called turkey tail. This was called reishi. And a lot of the mushroom names are a little exotic. Cordyceps, which is used for performance. This is the lion's mane. This is right now one of the most popular mushrooms in the US. It's touted to help with focus and cognitive function. And it's funny how they look as well. Is like lion's mane, looks like I guess like a mane of a lion, so that's how it's named that way. But my fascination with these is mostly through their health benefits. Like you saw in the beginning video, mushrooms are used in almost half of the pharmaceuticals out there. Penicillin is the one you would know, but out of the 20 best-selling drugs, about 10 utilize fungi. And they can be used to clean oil spills. They can help remove diesel from the soil. They can eat plastic. A few years ago, we found a mushroom that eats plastic. Plastic has been around 100, 120 years, and so far we haven't figured out what does it compost or not. We don't know yet, but we found a mushroom that likes to eat it, and then we can eat the mushroom, and it has health benefits. But I think the environmental change it's hard to change the world through the environmental impact. It's hard to change the world to sometimes a lot of like very esoteric topics. But what often people are first interested in, hey, what can I do today to feel good today, right? And mushrooms can help with that. Here's a little chart that shows a mushroom chaga, which is this one. Grows on a birch tree. It grows for 10 to 25 years, so very slowly. And birch has these healthy compounds like betulin and betulinic acid. That's why if you go to Finland or Russia, you hit yourself with birch leaves because they have these healthy oils in the bark. And the mushroom kind of eats them and then gets them in a form that then we can utilize. And the amount of antioxidants is quite incredible. So antioxidants are one of the things that are most proven for general health and wellness in the world. It's kind of a buzzy word. People don't really know what it means, but they are color pigments. Not all color pigments are antioxidants, but all antioxidants are color pigments. It's like the champagne thing with the sparkling wine. Not all sparkling wine is champagne, but all champagne is sparkling wine, right? And these color pigments can help with cardiovascular health. They can help protect our immune system. A lot of the most common ways how people die today, and they can really help with longevity. And people often, the internet loves to debate what antioxidants are good and what has the highest amount. But just for the sake, the two big bubbles are two different ways how you can process a wild Siberian chaga. And then you have some of the other more antioxidant-rich foods from dark chocolate to acai berry. And this gives you an idea how abundant these mushrooms are in these nutrients and how potentially you could benefit from them. And that's a chart on how to use them. So mushrooms are often used, for most people, they're used in like pizza or pasta or something like the very narrow focus. People mostly focus on portobello and like cremini type mushrooms, maybe shiitake. And shiitake is a good mushroom, but a lot of these culinary mushrooms are not that good. They grow on the ground and they're not that nutrient dense. They're kind of like mass produced. Think of like your normal culinary mushrooms almost like iceberg lettuce versus arugula, right? There's nothing wrong with iceberg lettuce. But clearly, nettle or dandelion or arugula has a lot more, punch. And the same with mushrooms. And when we talk about, generally about mushrooms, it's like anything. Is like you have really good, really average, and then really bad things. And that's where actually my company name Four Sigmatic also stems from. It's just geeky out of math. So if you take all the world's foods, there's roughly like, let's say 1.8 million things you can eat, and you put it on a bell curve, and compare their nutrient density, it will form a normal distribution. And this is normal in science, including natural sciences. If you take a large enough sample size, you look at single variable, like how tall are people, or what is their IQ, tends to form a normal distribution. The foods are the same. And if you look at their nutrient density, most foods are just normal, good. Some are like solid health foods. And then some foods are kind of bad, right? And if you go for standard deviations, which are no sigmas. If you go 4 standard deviations, you get to the top 50 foods in the world, right? And out of those top 50 foods, there are things like lemon, black pepper, cinnamon, coconut, green tea, cacao, things that you know. Then there's foods that you might know, like turmeric or ginseng or maca. And then there's really foods that very few people know, like the reishi mushroom or astragalus root. And I'm just passionate about the things that are the most currently scientifically studied foods, and funny enough, those tend to be also the foods that have been used the longest throughout different cultures. So every part of the world tends to have their own like foods that they've elevated to kind of a sacred status over multiple generations, and every generation after that has thought that that food is special for some reason. So if you go to Bali or Costa Rica, or you go to Finland and Russia, or you go to Africa, you'll find certain foods are elevated over others. And that's what I'm most passionate about. And out of those 50, about 10 are mushrooms. So that's our farm where I grew up. And I think besides the health benefits of mushrooms, the one thing that I really want to kind of leave you today with is just generally about what it takes to do something new. I feel like the topic was like how to move from dirt to gold. And I think that's the lesson that I've learned over the years of coming from a small farm in Finland to Venice Beach, California, and building a business and creating companies, like understanding that in order to create value or capture value, you have to see undervalued things. Okay, so any form of business, be it investing or something else, you're trying to find an asset or a thing that has more value than other people think. Like you think the stock is worth $10, but the market thinks it's $5. If you buy it at 5, you think eventually the market will know it's worth 10, right? The same with if you start a business or you have an idea, you try to find something that which others don't yet see, or they see it, but they don't understand the true value and power of it. So probably, let's say Google in the early days, there were people who thought, oh, search engine has value, right? It's some value, but then people didn't see what's the implications of having that value and how you can transport it to other factors. And then investors at Google probably made, good profit by seeing that it was an undervalued asset, right? So I'm from a town of maybe like 150 people, and I'm there, I didn't travel growing up, and my dream is to get Americans to drinking mushrooms. That's a pretty radical idea, right? So it's like, I came here, I started the business, and I told everyone, hey, I want to get the whole of America drinking mushrooms, because that's the most ancient way of actually consuming these tree mushrooms. And I know their benefits, and people are like, you're crazy, nobody drinks mushrooms around here, right? So, but I believed in it, which is kind of one of the 3 tips I want to leave you guys today with from the business side is if you want to achieve anything, you have to be super passionate about it and believe in it. And the second thing is that hopefully whatever you do is based on some first principles. With me, it was science, understanding the research around mushrooms, understanding their history and their cultural implications, and also understanding how to prepare them. And so you can't just make up stuff. It needs to be based on some sort of like first principle or a logic. And then finally is like, as you start building the business, remembering why you started. I was a couple weeks ago in Lapland with a bunch of friends. It was minus 39 degrees and went to frozen water. It's actually below, it's like 25 degrees. There's a stream that keeps the water open. Like, this is the culture why I started the business, is the Finnish culture and the culture of like a natural living. And then I moved to California to build the business, and sometimes the life here is not as natural as it was at a farm. But it's like really important for me as I go to remind myself why I started the business. So this is the Sami culture. This is the only indigenous culture in Europe, partly in Finland as well. And how they use mushrooms is one of the sources of inspiration for me. And here's examples of products that we do, like mushroom coffee or mushroom chocolate, lattes, wellness tonics. And one of the reasons why we do this is that mushrooms, the healthy mushrooms, don't taste anything like portobello. They actually taste very bitter. And most Americans don't like bitter. So when I came here and I made like mushroom tea, people are like, this is gross. First of all, I don't like tea. Secondly, I don't like this flavor. So I had to kind of reverse engineer and figure out what are the bitters that Americans like or most Anglo-Saxon cultures like. And I figured out there's only a couple: coffee and chocolate, black coffee and dark chocolate, with some of the only bitters that were commonly available to people. So using those palettes and those delivery systems as incorporating into people's lives. But to kind of recap, there's some of the books I've written. One about the history of the Sami people, one a cookbook, how to use mushrooms, and about the top 10 mushrooms. But to recap, kind of my talk is, I believe in the power of mushrooms. I think they're an organism much smarter than we realize. I think they're undervalued, and that's why I'm also excited to build a business around them. I believe a lot in their power for myself, but also I believe that you should focus on doing something that is undervalued and getting people to understand the value. Then that's also smart business. I think if you want to learn more about mushrooms, there's a lot of resource that you can go to. I can highlight a few books and learning methods, how you can learn about them. And I think in the next 10 years, we'll see multiple different research coming out for mushrooms, for health benefits, for cognitive function, for immune system, that I think will shock a lot of people. And that gets me excited every day to start building Four Sigmatic. But with that, if you have any questions about the health benefits on Four Sigmatic or the mushrooms in general, if you have questions on anything mushroom related, happy to take it.
Is this a microphone? Oh.
Yeah.
This isn't about mushrooms, but snails eat mushrooms. Does that mean snails are healthy too?
Yes and no. So not because they eat mushrooms, that's not the reason. So there's certain mammals that eat mushrooms, bears, deer, rabbits. There's certain insects that eat mushrooms. That doesn't mean that that's why that species is good for you. But I would say generally, we're very focused as a culture on large mammals that have flesh. This is like a complete separate topic from health. We're really obsessed about just eating few types of animals. So the classic debate is, should I eat animals or should I not eat animals? But often it's coming from a lens of eating mostly large mammals that are very domesticated, that are almost always female. We almost only eat women. So we don't eat bull, we eat the cow. We don't eat like a boar, we eat the female. Chicken, the same, we don't eat the rooster. We eat very highly processed animals, and we don't even eat the whole piece of that animal. We mostly focus on the flesh part versus like the liver and the eyeballs and all the things that most people think it's gross is actually like really nutrient dense. And a lot of insects and smaller animals tend to be healthier actually because they're lower in the food chain. So you tend to be like, the lower you're in the food chain and early you are, the cleaner it is. Or if you go further in the food chain and you go to bigger animals or even bigger fish, you have to be more careful about the quality. So it's usually safer to eat a small fish than a big fish, but you really have to know where the big fish is coming. So, but it's not because they eat mushrooms, that's why snails are healthy, they just are. Yeah. Can you pass the mic to him?
Can I throw it?
You can throw it.
Hi, thanks for the talk.
Yeah.
You raised a point about bitterness. I was just wondering, like, have you found yourself compromising in the healthiness of the mushrooms by like adding sugar at any point, or?
Yeah, most of our products don't have sugar, and I don't really believe in adding sugar, especially processed sugar. We have a couple products that have coconut palm sugar, about 2 grams per serving.
Awesome.
And coconut palm sugar is a lot healthier, has more minerals, and is it more kind of diabetic friendly. But don't believe in adding sugar. We use things like monk fruit and stevia in certain products, and certain products are just unsweetened. It's kind of this healthy balance of like knowing where the market is and knowing where you want to get to, right? And kind of like bridging the gap. So let's assume you want really technology. I'm from Finland. We love like MySQL and Linux and all this stuff. Linux never really got big except in servers, just partly because the user interface was not the easiest to use, right? And or even Nokia, where our farm is like, think of Nokia leading the mobile technology and then Apple taking over. And it's partly because iPhone was just so much easier to use for most people, right? And Nokias were always not. Yeah. And the same here is like, if my dream is to get here, but consumers are here, how do I meet them in the middle? How do I make a product that is a little more bitter than what they're used to, a little less sweet, a little less artificial, still healthy, but I kind of meet them, because without compliance, there's no change.
Yeah.
There's no, like, you can buy a pass to the gym, but if you never go, it doesn't help you. So rather do a shitty workout than no workout. So in this case, the same thing. But yeah, I wouldn't add much sugar or any sugar to these products, because I think it jeopardizes the main function, which is kind of being more like anti-inflammatory and protecting the immune system. And when you add these sugars and sweeteners, it can kind of do the opposite. Mushrooms can also balance blood sugar and support blood sugar management. So when you kind of do that, it kind of counterbalances the benefits. So
yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Yeah.
So I've heard formulating new products and bringing them to market is like a multi-year process, and I guess takes a lot of R&D and energy and
Sure.
research. I'm curious, you have a lot of different products. I keep seeing new stuff that you introduce
Yeah.
quite regularly. How long is your design process? And how...
By the way, thank you for asking that. You're the first person to ever ask it. I'm very passionate about this topic. So I'm the product founder. So if we would be a tech company, I would be like loving to make the code myself. And I'm like, this is really a topic that I could talk for days. So you're right. Most people take multiple years to build a product. For us, my goal is 2 months. Realistically, we're at 3, but it's still drastically shorter than for most people. And that requires few fundamental things to be in place to innovate so quickly. So obviously, like sourcing ingredients, any ingredients they're going to use, you have to be really good at that. So you have to have a baseline infrastructure of like, hey, where do you get products? But that's still like somewhat easy to solve, where most, even large companies, take years to develop a product and they don't succeed with it. And I think one of the key things why we've been successful in a short while building products is a couple fundamental things that I think is transferable to any industry, any product, any situation. First of all, being close to the end consumer, right? A lot of people who, especially large companies, try to create products from an ivory tower. They send out surveys and focus groups and whatever, try to figure out what's the trend. They read reports. And I think they're already, from them, they're behind the curve. Versus every day engaging with the consumer and knowing what's out on the market and listening to their needs and wishes. So we do tons of community work in person to meet people, to talk with them, and being in that interface. So whatever you're trying to build, the more time you can spend or actually even be the consumer, who I think I'm as well, is every day using these products myself, is easier the R&D is. And the more removed you are from the end consumer, target consumer, or the lifestyle or the industry, whatever, the harder it is, right? Sometimes you can get too close to it, yes, but nevertheless, like the closer you are to interface. So I could come out with 20 to 30 product ideas in an hour, just by looking at my own lifestyle in different parts of my day, week, month, year, and figure out where are the gaps where I need optimal performance. So where do I need a boost and enhance a support? And it would be so easy. And then you kind of pick your battles, like what is easy to execute, what has big upside. And then the other thing that is very few people have is besides the customer proximity or the customer interface with products, is that they think they have to be right. And I think even our best products, our currently best-selling products, have gone through multiple iterations. And I think if you remove your ego and you just have like, hey, I have a thesis, this is what I hope to get, eye health, gut health. Okay, I think most people, the gut is messed up because A, B, and C, and this time of the day they need support. Hey, this is my idea, let's bring this, let's make healthy lemonade, whatever it is. And then you try to innovate for it. And then you come with the concept to the market, you let people try it, they give you feedback, and then you iterate. Most large companies especially, they want to get the product be so good from the get-go. And probably Gmail or something like that has gone through, seemingly so similar, gone through hundreds of thousands of iterations over the years, right? And that's just how it is. And I think most people try to get a perfect product from the beginning, and that's a big failure. So we have a big direct-to-consumer business besides the retail business with Whole Foods and Erewhon and Sephora and whoever we work with. But with that online kind of like email list and our community, we can test products really quickly. And within like 30 days, we saw how many people bought it. We can send them a survey, ask them what they think. In 45 days to 60 days, we know how many people of those repeat purchased. And then we already have a good baseline understanding how to make it better. So being really close to the customer and not being scared to fail or be ready to iterate. Like we assume that we will not get it right, and we assume that we need to tweak it and amend it over the goes. And we also assume that some of them, like half the products, will be discontinued at some point. You're more likely to create more innovation versus if you're always scared to fail, then you kind of be frozen and you try to perfect it. So I don't know if that helped with that.
Yeah. Nice. Easier.
Hey, I got here a little late, so I don't know if you covered this already, but
That's okay.
what was some of your biggest challenges to like growth in the early stages, like getting your first customer? Like, what did that look like? Which should have you spent more time on, and which should have you deprioritized? I guess getting through that initial hurdle where no one knows who Four Sigmatic is.
Yeah.
And suddenly, you have your first customer. What does that look like?
Sure. So I started the company in Europe, and then when I brought it to US, so I had to go twice through the process. When I was like first getting the first customer in Europe, and then came to US, and nobody cares about what you did in Europe. The Americans just don't care at all. So you kind of had to restart. So when I started in Europe, it was actually really easy for me to get the first customers because I was in that industry and I had tons of friends. So the first 50 to 100 people, I was just like friends or people I knew, which is really valuable because you could really get feedback really quickly. But it was a lot harder to scale. So in Europe, it was easier to get initial traction, but then harder to scale for us. And some of the things I spend a lot of time focusing on is the ingredient and sourcing, which is like the geeking out part. And unfortunately, most consumers don't care. But it was important for me to know that I had like the best raw materials. I don't regret it, but it definitely took a lot longer. The second thing is that I didn't raise venture funding. I didn't have capital. So even if you had success just by not having a lot of cash, you had to kind of really slowly chip away. And that was a big hurdle, having patience, because as an entrepreneur, you want everything to happen overnight and just crush it and kill it. And when you didn't have cash and you had a big dream of getting people to drink mushrooms and nobody drank mushrooms, it was like really hard. So having patience and then figuring out how to scale. I had initial traction, but how to scale was really difficult in the beginning. And then if I say something other than that is like the flavor was something that we focused a lot on. And if you don't have a food or beverage product, just the ease of user experience is kind of maybe the touch point is like, I was so obsessed with the technology and the ingredients versus not enough with the flavor and the ease of use straight out of the gates. And then when I came to the US, the challenge was being an immigrant. I've lived in multiple countries, but this is the only country where it really felt like it was hard to open a bank account. You know, everything was so difficult, and that took a lot of time. And it was harder here to get the initial traction, but then when it scaled more beautifully. There's just one language, one currency, versus Europe is multiple languages, it's legally just a hassle. The US, it was just easier to scale. And I had already thought about that scaling. And what I would have hoped I would focus even more on is the thing that people think we did really well, but I just think you can never do it well enough, is storytelling and community. And if you ask people in the industry, they often know that we build an awesome community, but I wish I would have even doubled down on that and maybe focused a little less on kind of the minutia of just like retailers and caring about the industry stuff. The B2B stuff I should have focused even less on, and even more double down on community and storytelling and get those made it even better.
So I want to sort of silo in on one point there.
Yeah.
So what would you say was your best growth channel in that early stage? Was it content? Was it, building a community? Was it Instagram? Was it?
Oh yeah. Okay. So purely growth marketing wise, our success, because we didn't have money and I couldn't do any. So if there's three types of media, there's paid, owned, and earned. We mostly killed it with the earned, and through influencers is because your favorite health influencer's favorite influencer probably used our products. Still today, if you think of the person you go to in health advice, whoever they go to for health advice uses our products. And through that, we had this constant credibility and support from people that it really mattered. And that helped us grow into one phase. And then soon after that, we started winning with podcasts. That was a big thing for us, is because podcast allowed long form content. Our topic is not easy. It's not bullet sizable. You can't sell it on as easily on 20-second, 15-second Instagram story or something like that. It requires deeper explaining and trust. I was like, hey, mushroom coffee sounds gross. I definitely don't want to try that. But if somebody you trust says it actually doesn't taste like mushrooms and it makes me feel awesome, you should try it. You're more likely to try. So on the kind of second wave, long form content really worked well for us. Predominantly podcast, but also long email marketing, blog post, other educational forms, but especially podcast was. I think still podcast is so undervalued as a form of as a growth way for any product or service.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found out through Tim Ferriss. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. Probably. So I'm curious how you were talking about sourcing, and then you also mentioned how large-scale mushroom production kind of lost its nutrition. Mm-hmm. And then I was also thinking about, I've read that truffle production is down about 99% over the last 100 years due to like too much harvesting of wild truffles, and they're hard to grow and mycorrhizal and whatnot. So how do you view sourcing and maintaining quality and the sustainability thereof?
Yeah, definitely. Again, a topic. Thanks for asking. Like, I don't think a lot of people focus on that. There's a lot of foods that have become popular, let's say chia seeds or maca, and then suddenly people are like, we can't actually produce that. That like internet kind of made few things really popular really quickly, and agriculture is a slow-moving, thing. It's like it doesn't change overnight. You can't just physical agriculture doesn't. You can't just takes a long time, and farmers usually are risk averse and a little bit is like they're not going to change their plans because Instagram influencers want to sell chia seeds or something like that. So with mushrooms, about 1/3 of our mushrooms are wildcrafted, 2/3 are grown on logs. And the wildcrafting is the harder part, and the log growing is the easier part because it's super good yield. So dollar per square feet is really high. So you take trees that are already dead, because that's their natural habitat. A lot of these mushrooms grow on dead or decaying trees. You drill a hole, you put a spore in, and it will grow a mushroom that you can, for that square foot, you can get a lot of money. So that part is a little easier, especially when you talk to people who understand what mushrooms to grow. So, and mushrooms are extremophile, so they grow really easily, you just give them the right environment. So that 2/3 part was the easy. That wildcrafting was the harder part, right? Because you have to somebody needs to go to the forest and pick up a piece of chaga to get this. And I could talk for this for hours. The one benefit we had is Finland is a small country, but it's bordering. It used to have one of the biggest economic borders in the world between Finland and Russia. And Russia, starting from Finland, happens to have the largest forest in the world called taiga, T-A-I-G-A. And that's a forest size of United States. So one forest size of United States, right? And that forest is predominantly perfect for a birch tree that happens to grow chaga. And it happens to grow pretty much everywhere. And you just need to kind of know where it grows and how to collect it. But it's more like education on harvesters and telling them where to get it and how to get it. That was like operationally a little bit more difficult. But yeah, it takes a lot of thinking, and most people don't focus on it. They just read on a blog that acai berry is good for you, and then let's sell acai berry, and they don't never think about the supply chain until they're much later in the process. And this is even with collagen right now. There's like most collagen brands they don't have enough collagen to sell because collagen has become popular. And I don't know if you know how you make collagen, but you basically usually boil like the hides and the bones, and you kind of skimp the cream from the top, and it's like quite the process. And it was just a waste product before, kinda, and now it's become like every beauty person is trying to use collagen. Every athlete's trying to use collagen. The demand just went sky high in a few years, and people are like, hey, we don't have enough of this. So now they're trying to figure out how else can we produce collagen. So yeah, most entrepreneurs don't think about that. So thanks for asking that.
Thank you.
I love this, by the way. You can throw it.
Thanks for your talk. It's been really interesting. How do you go about picking which mushrooms are going to end up in the tea products or the coffee products, and how do you figure out what the benefits are that you can advertise associated with the mushrooms that you've picked?
Sure. So that's actually easier than with most food products with mushrooms, because you have to cook them because they're not bioavailable raw. It's like a rock. There's few outside if you want to try them. So you have to cook them kind of like you do bone broth. So you do this like decoction. So you cook it for a long time. And because you can control the temperature and the amount of mushrooms, you can standardize to a certain strength. So it's almost like cooking it for days to standardize it to a certain strength of coffee. And it's a very easy lab test just to make you have a strong enough tea. So some years you have to use more mushrooms than other times, and sometimes you use less. Sometimes you have to cook it longer or shorter. So you can just control the process to get a standardized output. So yeah, it's actually, that part is quite easy to engineer, but you just need to sometimes use more mushrooms. So sometimes we're more profitable than other times, I guess. That's the other way to say it. Is sometimes it costs more to make that cup and sometimes less.
And then for figuring out like what the health benefits are, is that like historically based, like based on traditions?
Yeah, and if I may comment on that, that's a common theme that I hope us as a consumers will be more educated on, is we want everything standardized. And I don't think nature works like that. Our product is standardized, but I would hope that we as consumers can accept the fact that sometimes the nutrient density of a food we buy is higher or lower depending on seasonality and what you eat. And I think us expecting always to get the same flavor, same result is forcing us to eat actually worse food, because then the producers have to produce a product like that, the apple to always taste the same. And it's just, nature doesn't work like that. So if we can accept some variability in flavor and nutrient density, as long as we know the baseline sourcing, that will be actually better for the world than always expecting the chocolate to taste exactly the same, because even chocolate has seasonal variety. But to your second question about nutrient density, so the benefit of mushrooms is that about 40% of pharmaceuticals use mushrooms. So there's a lot of research funding for fungal research. This is unfortunately, there's not a lot of research funding for whole foods. So of all foods, even let's say blueberry, which is people generally, everybody knows it's healthy and it's been a long time, it's research. There isn't that much research on blueberries, because who would fund that? Right. There's no economic interest on blueberry research. If somebody researched blueberry, they want to isolate a compound, an anthocyanin in the blueberry that is good for eyesight, and then we'll brand it as the Alaskan anthocyanin, and then we'll put it in supplements and sell it. But so the whole food research by at large is so limited versus something that you can patent, because you can't patent whole foods. But lucky enough, because mushrooms, there's a lot more of them. I would recommend, if you want to look at any food product, PubMed is kind of a database for various just research. You can put the Latin name of any food. You can get roughly the amount of research. The fact that there's 5,000 research papers doesn't mean it's healthy. The most researched foods in the world are tobacco, number one, and marijuana, number two. Soon after that, you get to things like lemon and ginseng and other things like that. So it doesn't guarantee if something is well researched that it's healthy, but it gives you a pretty good oversight of what it is good for. And mushrooms, shiitake, reishi, things like that are very well studied. So you look at their general research and you figure out that they're good for like maintaining blood glucose levels. They're good for gut health. You kind of like give oversight. And then we make, first, just to be safe side, we make buffery claims. So instead of saying is that you will be smarter when you consume our products, we say, hey, this is like a hug from your grandma, and then you can do the rest. But it's baseline on just hard science on a genus of anything, and then looking at what is it generally good for, how well is its research, who researched it, how they researched it, and then you kind of try to apply it into a food product. But yeah, I mean, just unfortunately, there just isn't a lot of whole food research, since you can't own that research. You can't patent it. So
Right.
It's a challenge. Throw it.
That's one if you want to ask.
I'm curious to know about your mushroom diet. Like, how
Yeah.
do you use these products, and what kind of mushrooms do you use, and how do you cook them, and all that kind of stuff?
So I don't answer that question partly ever, including I don't answer how I eat, because people want a shortcut, and how I eat is not necessarily how you should eat, or how I use mushrooms is not necessarily how you should use mushrooms. Also, how I use mushrooms in February 2019 is not how necessarily I'll use them in March. March is a busier month for me than February, so maybe when I'm busy, I have to use different things to support my busy lifestyle, right? I had that one slide somewhere here, give you a rough idea of time frame. So generally speaking, like, you don't necessarily want caffeine in the morning because your cortisol already spikes. A lot of people love it as a method, but you naturally should be energetic. You should probably go outside, catch fresh air, maybe move a little bit, but you want to hydrate. And you probably want antioxidants like a shield, a bodyguard for the day. So mushrooms like chaga and shiitake that have a lot of SOD, superoxidase dismutase, is this super antioxidant. Using things like that might be really good for the day to kind of get started. And then in the afternoon, when you need a little pick-me-up, using something like lion's mane that boosts cognitive function, or using something like cordyceps that gives you energy without caffeine or sugar might be a good idea when you naturally get that little dip in the afternoon. The best scenario is you taking a nap or a siesta, but if that's not possible because of work, maybe try something like that. And then in the evening time, you want things that support somehow kind of calming down process. So reishi is used for kind of the endocrine system, the HPA axis, kind of calming your body. It's known as the queen of mushrooms. Maybe it'll help you reach deeper sleep. And then shiitake could help with phase 1 and 2 liver detox that often happens overnight. So that might be a good strategy if you want to cleanse your liver. Liver is a kind of a mirror to skin health as well. So there are different times how you can use it. I just never answer how I use it. You just have to figure out yourself. I know it's not the answer people want because they want a formula, do A, B, and C, but maybe that gives you some framework.
Yeah, I wasn't looking for a formula. I was just curious how you apply this.
A lot, different ways, and yeah, in high quality. That's my 3 formulas.
Cool. Thanks.
But variety is huge for, even if you have an adaptogen you can use every day, variety is awesome. So even with dark leafy greens, even if arugula is awesome or dandelion is awesome, try all kinds of greens and just kind of mix them, match them. And same with mushrooms. It's beneficial to mix and match them. And so even though I'm not a fan of portobello, you can still have it. Just get different varieties into your system, and the more variety you have, the more intelligence you're getting from food into your cells and into your DNA. Yeah.
Sorry, I might have missed this when you were talking about scaling, but in terms of timeline, I was wondering how long did it take for you to go from zero, or not zero, but like a product idea to get like a packaged product ready for the market?
Took about 2 years on the first time because you have to solve the operational challenges, which is harder for me than the product concept. So the first time sourcing ingredients, getting a partner who can make the packaging, that took a lot longer than coming out with the vision and the use case. So that was easier for me. But maybe for another founder, it's different. But if you've never done food or beverage manufacturing, I highly recommend having patience that it might take a lot longer to actually get the product produced than you think. If you have a donut that all your neighbors love your donut, and your friends and family are saying, you should make this donut, it's a hit, it's a great donut, and then you figure out that you've been making at home and now you need an FDA-approved commercial kitchen or contract manufacturer to make it, it could take a lot longer than you think. So it took about 2 years to get the first version out. Partly was my incompetence, like not just me, just not knowing enough of the details. It probably takes about a year normally, just got every paperwork in order. And for me, it took 2 years just because I didn't know all the details.
And you have to, like, did you have to do most of it yourself, or there are like contractors that do like a bunch of different stuff?
I had to do most with myself and my founding team because nobody had done what we did. Nobody had done a dual extracted wild-crafted mushroom. Nobody had done it. So they have to figure that out. Nobody done these packaged mushroom beverages. They were sold in capsules or in big ground bags. So I had to figure out how to put these mushroom powders in packets that look like almost like emergency or a tea bag that you can just pour in a cup and add hot water. Like I had to figure out that kind of stuff. And there wasn't, but if you ever think of doing a dietary supplement, there's like hundreds of companies that can help do it. If you want to make a beverage yourself, there's hundreds of companies making it. I would just highly recommend is that don't outsource R&D and IP fully to someone ever. Like even if you use their resources for certain things, always have really engaged, you or someone else in the team really engaged in that process. So you know, A, how it's done, so it's easier for you to sell and market it because you know it's like, hey, how is this natural orange flavor made? Is it from a squeeze from an orange, or how do we get this orange flavor into your product? That's like a question somebody might ask you, so you know the answer. But secondly as well is like, then you own the technology, because in food and beverage, there really isn't the same way code or technology that you have in IT. So be really engaged, and there's definitely a lot of resources for beauty, skincare, protein, food and beverage. Just for me, there wasn't, because nobody done what we did. Yeah. Okay, last one.
Nervous when it comes at you. Catch it. So you've talked about mushrooms, breathing and eating and being a smarter food. Are you saying that mushrooms have like a type of consciousness that is measurable?
Yes, that's what I'm exactly saying. And you can measure it, and they've measured it multiple times. They put mushrooms in a maze, and funny enough, the mushroom finds its way out of the maze. They put mushrooms to figure out how to build the subway system in Tokyo, or actually the railway system in the UK, and the mushroom figured out how to build a railway system more efficient than what humans had built. So yes, it is measurable. I also think that the most interesting intelligence that mushroom have of global consciousness is not measurable and we have no clue of it. And I think we will not have a clue of it for a long, long time. And that would be a whole nother talk about the consciousness of mushrooms. But yes, I think they're higher being. I'm just leaving you with a nugget, planting a seed, is that mushrooms almost always live with bacteria, and bacteria almost always lives with mushrooms. So right now in your body, there's about 10 times more bacteria than you have cells in your body, and there's a lot of cells. And almost always this bacteria lives with mushrooms. If you take kombucha, it's a symbiotic organism, basically brewed black tea with a little bit of sugar that interacts with bacteria and fungi. If you think of fermented foods, sauerkraut, kimchi, whatever. And right now, we've talked about how your gut is your second brain or your first brain. How we talk about your gut instinct, your spider sense, how you just know something. You can't explain it in words, but you feel it, you know it, and it's often related to your gut biome, which is now a big research topic, and how that gut biome is actually tied into probiotics and prebiotics, and how those prebiotics live with the bacterial kingdom and the fungal kingdom, and they have knowledge that we've yet to figure out, and I think that knowledge is much greater than us. And they found mushrooms growing at every level of the atmosphere. Mushrooms can survive in space, so they've traveled a long ways in different places, and I think I don't think during my lifetime we'll figure out that intelligence. But I do believe that one of the things that will happen during my lifetime is we'll find the seventh kingdom in biology. I think there will be a new kingdom that is not named yet, and that kingdom will be somehow related to the yeast or the collaboration between bacteria and fungi, and we'll figure out a new kingdom lives on this planet. Because back in the day, there was not 6 kingdoms, there was 2, and then there was 3, and then there's 4. There's 5, now there's 6, and we think biology's come to its end and there's 6 kingdoms, and I think, my belief is that we'll find a 7th one. And with that, thanks for coming, and I appreciate you sharing my knowledge.
And Taro, really quickly, where can people find you and learn more about your product? And
yeah, we have easiest is actually, if you're here, we have a shop on Abbot Kinney called the Shroom Room that serves free beverages. I know shit here at Google is free as well, but if you want to walk on Abbot Kinney, you can get a free mushroom tonic anytime. We are also on all social channels at Four Sigmatic, FOURSIGMATIC. I'm a little bit hard to find, but I have a really bad Instagram called I Am Taro that you can follow my adventures. I post rarely and randomly, sometimes good stuff, sometimes not so good stuff. So that's kind of where you can find us. But stop by at Abbot Kinney. You can find us on Whole Foods, Erewhon, different places here, and as well if you want to buy it, Amazon, foursigmatic.com. We'll figure it out. Anyway, thank you. Sorry.